People and Earth is celebrating the International Day of Forest with the Forestry Commission of Zimbabwe. Many people are chopping down trees for firewood, settlements, agriculture, wildfire, tobacco curing, charcoal, brick making, logging, overstocking, construction, mining, and brushwood. Unknowingly, this is causing harm to our forests. Before we get into the restoration of forests, let us look back at what we used to have as Zimbabweans in terms of forest and what happened to those woodlands. That way we can learn and know where and when we went wrong. Please, Ms. Makoto, take us back to what we used to and what happened.
Yes, talking about what we used to have as a country doesn't need us to go very way back in history. I'm looking at probably 15 years from today. We pretty much had intact forests as a country. You referred earlier on to demarcated forests. Those are what we call our gazetted forests or protected forests. These were quite vibrant because of the fact that they are protected. You would have a lot of wildlife in it, and the forest ecosystem itself was very much intact. And then when we go to the communal areas where we have our communal woodlands, they as well were quite intact, providing the ecological services that they are supposed to provide for communities. But over the past 15 years, a lot has happened, and we've seen a lot of cutting down of trees for various reasons. In your intro as well, you referred to a number of factors that we are calling drivers of deforestation currently. We are looking at expansion of settlements. You've seen there, as population grows, there is need for more land for people to build their homes and so forth. And then we look at settlement for agriculture. A lot of people are farmers these days. Everybody wants to be a farmer, but that has an impact on the forest as a resource, because for people to start producing their crops, they have to clear a lot of forests to make way for their fields. And then you look at other economic activities that people are embarking on that also have an impact on our forest resources. Mining, for instance. The fact of the matter is, Zimbabwe, we have a mining act that overrides all other acts. So in as much as we have a forest act that protects the forest as a resource, if there is a mineral that is found within a forest area, it takes precedence over whatever other natural resource exists in that area. So we have that conflict in terms of the policies that we have a country that is impacting on the forest as a resource. So all these factors, I've just mentioned a few, they are quite varied. They are, from a local perspective, local communities, they've embarked on charcoal production as economic activities. A lot of it related to the economic hardships people are facing right now. They are looking for their cheap hustle, something that they can easily get and make a quick buck. A lot of charcoal production is happening. We actually have what we are calling charcoal production hotspots across the country. Selling of firewood, you would agree with me that with the energy challenges that we are facing as a country, there is a great demand for firewood as an energy alternative, which happens to be the cheapest for a lot of communities, because when you talk of the other alternatives like the use of gas, the use of solar is probably out of reach for a lot of our communities. So the forests become the cheapest alternative, and this has resulted in the rampant cutting down of trees. So yes, this is what has been happening over the past 15 years that has gotten us to where we are right now, where we are saying our forest integrity is quite compromised. And we need to rise up to that fact and try to address the challenge before it gets any worse. And as it were, we are talking of healthy forests right now as a topical issue globally. And as Zimbabwe stands right now, we cannot talk of healthy forests.
Wow, that is some insightful information. So would you say that it's an issue of people not being educated?
We work a lot with communities. I'll be very frank. It's not a question of people not being aware of what they are doing or not being aware of legislation pertaining to the protection and conservation of forests. It's a question of sometimes when we take it to the grassroots level, it's a question of livelihood alternatives. As I mentioned earlier, you come to Harare, for instance, just for argument's sake, you have a 16-hour load shedding schedule for a person in the urban areas. And they will ask you, how do you want me to cook my meal for my children? At the end of the day, there's that fight between livelihoods and conservation. So something has got to give in terms of trying to address the challenges that are coming from another sector and also impacting on another sector. We are environment, but environment is suffering because of some energy challenges which belong to another sector that we also need to address.
All right, thank you so much for that. I'm going to hold you up on that one as we take a commercial break. We'll be right back, so make sure you stay tuned, guys. Welcome back. As what Forestry Commission of Zimbabwe and the world would say, health forestry brings health to people. Please, can you kindly share with us what that means?
Yes, healthy forests, we are talking here of an issue where you have what we also term in our sector is forest integrity, where there is a balance within the forest ecosystem. All the organisms that you find within it, the plant, the flora, the fauna that you find within a forest ecosystem is well balanced. To us, that is what you call a healthy forest system. And we are saying from such a system, you get a lot of benefits, direct and indirect. In terms of health, we are talking of basic things that we've learned ever since we were in kindergarten. You get our oxygen, the oxygen that we breathe in every day to keep us alive. You get the clean air. Our trees, they clean the air that we breathe. They clean up our water even. If you understand how the water cycle works, you'll know that there's a forest component that is responsible for keeping that cycle going on. The direct benefits also pertain to even the medicines that we can get from our forest areas. Traditionally, we know that our communities will go into a forest, they will come up with a root, a bark, a leaf, or something that they can take to address any ailment that somebody might be facing. And then you look at the food aspect that we get from the forest. We have a lot of products that come from the forest that fit into our food and nutrition security issues. You look at, if you go to Beitbridge Plum Tree, they are very rich in mopani worm, madora, amacimbi. And that's food and nutrition, and we are talking that's a direct benefit that feeds into the health of our communities. And then we look at the indirect benefits from the forest that also feed into the health of communities, the health of individuals within communities. Right now we are talking of issues of climate change, and we all know that we have all witnessed the impacts of climate change. We've all been affected some way, somehow by climate change. But we are saying the primary response that everyone can actually participate in is keeping our forests healthy, because we understand that when forests are standing, their automatic carbon sinks. They absorb all the carbon dioxide that is causing the global warming. And when we cut down those trees, we are actually cutting back in terms of our capacity to adapt or to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. So climate change and its impact have an adverse impact on our health. So that's an indirect as well contribution of our forests to the health and well-being of communities. So this is why we are saying healthy forests bring healthy people, be it directly or indirectly. And coincidentally, this is our theme for the International Day of Forests. We will talk more about that, but this is basically what we are saying, that if we need to see a community that is healthy in terms of its food supply, in terms of its clean air supply, in terms of its clean water supply, it starts with forests.
Wow, that is very profound. And as the Forestry Commission of Zimbabwe, what are you doing to educate the importance of woodlands?
Okay. Our work essentially is we work with communities, in communities. We belong under the Ministry of Environment, Tourism, Ministry of Environment, Climate, Tourism and Hospitality Industry. And you'll see there quite, we have our sister organizations that also fall under that ministry, the Environmental Management Agency, Parks and Wildlife This is in recognition that we all have a contribution to the well-being of the environment. So as that sector, we work to create awareness within communities our structures exist right from district level to national level. Going to any district today, you will find a forestry officer there, you will find even an EMA officer there. They need to work within the communities to create the awareness. And the fact that we are there, we learn the values of communities, and we also appreciate how they go about their daily living, so that whatever programs that we come up with, they fit into their everyday life. So that's our modus operandi, really, in terms of creating awareness on the importance of conserving our forests and the other resources associated with that. So that's one way of that's how the other side of how we work. And the other side, you referred to it earlier when you talked about our dual role. We also have the legislative side of things. This is where we try to enforce legislation related to forestry conservation. Our mandate is derived from the Forest Act, which you actually alluded to earlier on, and the Forest Act has in itself a number of things that it cites as illegal, and they are termed as crimes against the environment, and especially relating to forests and other and trees generally. And then we also have the Communal Land Forest Produce Act. This is an act that guides how we work within communal areas. Working with people is quite a sensitive area, because you have to factor in a lot of things, like I highlighted earlier, learning how people live and trying to make policies that work for them. That's how we try to impart the much needed awareness. Of course, we have other statutory instruments here and there, and we're actually finalizing on our forest policy right now. This is to try and strengthen our capacity to work within communities as we create awareness, and also try to inculcate that sense of conservation within the communities.
All right. And I heard you talking of the laws. All right. Is there any way of protecting the laws, or are they already protected?
We have laws to protect the resource that we are mandated to conserve, which is the forest. So I've highlighted the two key legislative pieces that we have: the Forest Act, Chapter 19.05, and we have the Communal Land Forest Produce Act, Chapter 19.04. Those two are the anchor of forest conservation in the country.
All right. Thank you so much for that. We will be right back as we take another break. Welcome back to our last segment of People and Earth. Today we had our expert in the forest industry, Ms. Makoto from the Forestry Commission of Zimbabwe. What advice can you give to Zimbabweans regarding the protection and conservation of our forests?
Thank you, Nicola. We have a responsibility as individuals, as communities, towards forest conservation. What we have done is we've come up with a number of initiatives that are sector specific to address the challenge that I highlighted earlier, that are, that come up due to the different factors that we also discussed. When it comes to deforestation related to mining, for instance, we want to work very well with mining companies so that we do what we call rehabilitation after they've done their extraction. The good thing about forests is they regenerate if they are given time. So, and even areas that have been dug up to extract those minerals, we can plant trees, and those those areas can be restored back to the natural forest that we all want to see. So we've designed specific initiatives that deal with the various challenges that crop up in those sectors. We have the tobacco growing sector, for instance. There's a lot of deforestation that is attributable to tobacco growing in the country. It is a very highly economic, what's the word I'm looking for? We are gaining a lot as a country from the growing of tobacco, so to speak, but it has also a carbon footprint that we need to eradicate if we are going to say our tobacco is sustainably grown in the country. I referred earlier to the deforestation that is happening in the country. It currently stands at 262,000 hectares per annum for the country. And of that 262,000 hectares, we are saying 15 to 20% of it is attributable to tobacco farming in the country. We are looking here right from the point of clearing of land for agricultural expansion, people growing their tobacco, and mainly at the point of curing that tobacco. There's a lot of cutting down of trees, because you realize they actually use fresh trees to cure tobacco. So 15 to 20% of 262,000 hectares. But we are saying, can we let go of that, seeing that it is of high economic value? No, we can't. But what do we do to make it sustainable for the country? We have a specific program directed at that sector, which we are calling the Tobacco Wood Energy Program. I think we initially started on it on a goodwill basis with some communities in Manicaland, Makoni district to be specific, where we just introduced this need for farmers to grow their own almost renewable source of energy for tobacco curing. So we were introducing eucalyptus trees, your gum trees. They are fast growing by nature, and they can be used in very little time by tobacco farmers to cure their tobacco. Having seen that it works, we actually made it part of legislation through the statutory instrument 112 of 2012, which now mandates tobacco farmers to set aside a piece of land on their farm on which to grow fast-growing species of trees that they can utilize for tobacco curing. This is to reduce pressure on the indigenous resources. Indigenous resources, I'm talking here of our Msasa trees, our Mukwa trees, which if you cut them now, you and me, we will not be alive to see that regenerate to a mature tree. They are very slow growing by nature, so we want to safeguard our indigenous trees and allow tobacco farmers to use exotic or even other indigenous tree species that are fast growing. So that's a program that we designed specifically to address the challenge related to tobacco growing in the country. When we go into communities, we introduce trees that are of value to them. We have realized over the years that going into communities with tree planting programs and tell them to plant this type of tree, sometimes they don't take it up if that particular species is not of value to them. So what we do is we study, like I mentioned earlier, the values of that community, even trying to identify the trees that they generally use in their everyday lives, maybe for ritual purposes, the trees that they want when they bury their loved ones, or when, just getting to know the community. So those are the trees then we promote for planting in those particular communities, and this obviously will get a lot of uptake because people see value in those trees. And then we also had a program that was driving the growing of fruit trees in the country, trying to look at the food and nutrition security issues in the country. Given the climate change issues that we are facing, sometimes crops fail in the fields, but people can always go back into the forest. They can always go back to their trees that they've planted for sustenance. So we have quite a vibrant fruit tree growing program happening in the country right now, and this is how we work. Again, I go back to that issue of learning what the community needs, knowing what the community loves, and taking advantage of that to drive afforestation programs.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it's great that you've taken this initiative to actually educate people and show them which trees to work with in terms of making this whole issue less problematic.
Yes, definitely.
So we want to thank you for joining us on the show, and thank you for your time, for being here.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you stay tuned in next week, same place, same time.